Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about project managers who over-deliver, no, not over-deliver, over-promise on deliveries. So let's get into it. So I had a person from Malaysia reach out talking, kind of just to talk about a situation that he's facing at work where he feels as if he's in this constant situation where his PO has a client request of some sort and immediately the PO, almost regardless of situation, complies with the request from the client and says, yeah, of course we can do this, even if the changes, like this what we call scope creep. And scope creep, for those of you who don't know it, is just that you have agreed with your customer or your stakeholder that this is what we're supposed to deliver. And then you work on something, you deliver it, and then you show it to them, and then they kind of go, it would be better if we did it this way or that way. And this is the problem with having people review things, because it's very rare that they're ever happy. It's a continuous process. Scope creep is that you realize as you kind of go along that, oh, this would be nice, that would be nice, this would be nice, and then you just keep on adding things you can never actually deliver, and the project just kind of goes away from you. This is one of the main reasons why I argue that it is so important, I've said this in a few videos, to ask the right questions up front. It is impossible to foresee all the things, but it helps a lot if you understand stakeholders, if you understand, this comes with experience, to be the sort of person who understands what's going to happen if you just say, yeah, this is the specification, this is going to be fine, because it's never fine. But anywho, so for him, he's explained that basically in the manner that he, it's very common that he has to do crunch time type of things where they have to do extra hours and things like this, and he just wanted to talk to me a little bit about what my experiences are on this as well. And I can say firsthand that I know exactly how this sort of thing feels. I know exactly how, and I mean, maybe a few of you have had this situation as well. It's especially common in the consultancy and startup world, where, I've said in a few videos that the startup world and the smaller companies and consultancies and agencies and stuff like that, usually it is more hectic, because if you are working towards a third-party client, which the company actually really, really needs, the inclination of your managers is going to be to comply with almost everything. And this is something you have almost no control over. This is the difference, one of the differences between an inexperienced manager and an experienced manager. Because an inexperienced manager, it is a noble cause to a point, I suppose, that they just want the customer to be happy. But they are, how to put this, they are willing to risk the health of their company and the health of their developers over the possibility that the client will not be happy with a estimate in time or something like that, right? I mean, sometimes you do actually have to crunch something because of unforeseen events, or, I've said 100 times that the deadline is the most important thing, and it is. I mean, if you get an extension on a deadline, then it's not the deadline. The deadline is when the client says, this is a breach of contract, or you stop the funding or something like that. That's when the deadline is, right? But if they're willing to extend it, then you have some more time, right? But when this is a systematic thing, I basically asked him this thing. Like, I think that the first thing that you need to ask yourself is this job important to me? Because the thing is that if you want to change this, I can give you a few tips on how to suggest an improvement, or how to start moving things in the correct way that works. It has worked very well for me, but it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of investment, and it's going to take time, and it might not even work, because at the end of the day, you have absolutely no say unless you're allowed to have a say. And this is the developer life. You are the most important person and the least important person at the same time when you're working in an IT company. without you, there's no company. But you also never have much of a choice when it comes to sales and strategy and stuff like that. The people who set your time budget, if you will, they are the ones in charge usually, unless you work in a very progressive manner. And ideally you should work in that way if you can. But ask yourself first and foremost, is this job important? Because in effect what's happening is that, well, you're basically getting less pay. Because if you are systematically being asked to do extra hours, you are in effect just not getting paid for work that you're doing. I mean, you are, if we're going to be really blunt about things, you are being paid for the hours that you are being paid for. If you're asked to do more hours, if there's no monetary compensation or anything like that, then you're basically just working for less. That's it. And that's not very cool. And there's a lot of startups and companies out there who, this is where the family vibe comes, the dark side of having these cool trendy startups where, everybody's family, we're all working together. That's where this comes from, guys. Like, you should know that some companies really breathe and live this sort of thing, or live and breathe this stuff. But there's also quite a lot of companies, especially smaller consultancies, who breed this idea because of the benefits that it brings. It makes you feel pressured into staying those extra hours or sitting in the office late into the night to do things. This is the sort of thing you get when you have that office culture, and that is a lot cheaper than paying people. So he explained to me that usually what they do is that I know this as well, because no company wants to pay for overtime because that's expensive. So what they do is that they give you flex time instead. And flex time in this scenario is that, all right, you work some extra hours and you can take some extra hours. But here's the kicker. This was the thing that I thought was really nasty with his specific explanation, was that they have to get those hours approved. They can't just come in a little bit later or a little bit early whenever. Like, they have to get those 3 hours approved. And that is a systematic exploitation if I've ever seen one. Because then basically you can be guaranteed that you can request that a developer works overtime whenever you want, but you also control when they get that time back, if ever. And that means that you can basically sit and block any usage of that time until such a point that you feel that, oh yeah, we don't have so much, it doesn't really matter. Like, the developer has no say, because you need to get that time approved, right? And so we come back to that. Like, this is the thing. You really have to ask yourself, is this an important job? Because as a developer, you have options. And as I said, it's going to take time. So the concrete thing you can do, and this is unfortunately the same it's really only the same thing that you can do in any job. You can suggest that you start tracking time. In other words, you start doing story cards and you start doing a Kanban board or a Scrum or something like that. And you start estimating all the work that you are doing, because the goal here is to get your PO to understand that if you are at risk of not being able to deliver on time, the PO needs to step up. They need to actually do something about this, because the PO, their main focus is that the client is happy. And if there is a situation that arises where something changes in the scope of the story or their scope creep, even if the client is causing it themselves, they will not go to the client and say that, yeah, we can do it in an unreasonable amount of time, if they have a really good gut feeling that this is not going to work. They're not going to be able to deliver on this. So that's the first thing. Make sure that you're tracking all your time, because that way you can start to see a pattern in how long you need for every story, right? And apart from that, you can really only commit to yourself saying that, all right, I'm going to work the hours that I'm working. This is personal strength right here, and security in yourself. You will work from in accordance with your contract, and your PO will literally have to tell you to work extra hours, and then you will have to have a discussion. If that is a systematic thing, like if they are continuously asking you to put in extra hours and you're not getting that money back, or you're not getting the time back, then you have to tell them, okay, ideally you would simply say that, all right, no, but I've been working overtime X amount of hours now, I've been tracking that, and I still haven't been able to get this time back. I want to book a time, like this day or that day, I'm going to go in late or come in early or something like that. And then you can very quickly put them in a position where they actually have to. It's extra work. Ideally, you should be treated with more respect than this, or more flexibility than this. But if you can't, then hey, you can at least, you know, bend their arm a little bit. So doing something like that, like putting the, it's going to take time, and it might not even work, because they might not actually, as I said, they might not be so interested in changing things. I mean, this might be the way that this company works, and if this is the way that they work, then yeah, you're kind of stuck. So what I want you to take away from this is that when it comes to when it comes to doing overtime, sometimes you do have to do overtime. This is normal in quite a lot of professions. But if you're being systematically exploited through a PO who just overpromises and delivers and doesn't set expectations correctly with the stakeholders, then the first thing you need to ask yourself, is this worth it? I mean, you can try to change things, but I should warn you, it is not, it requires not only that you stay strong, it also requires that the PO is open to this idea and they mature into their role. That's fundamentally, I mean, this is a failure on their side. It is a failure on their side to do these overpromises. And you can push them towards that by tracking your time, making sure that they have all the information they need to know roughly how much time they need. Because if they can very clearly see with data that, yeah, this is going to be a very tight squeeze, they're not going to be so inclined to overpromise. Unfortunately, the response I got here was that their expectation in this specific company was that, yeah, well, they know this, but their solution to this problem is not to just ask for more time, just to hire more developers. And then I kind of go, oh, I'm just throwing up my hands in the air, and I'm going to say, if a PO's solution to delivering faster on a project is to add more developers, then this person is clearly not this is a rookie PO. Because unfortunately, I hate to tell you this, there's a sweet spot to how many people can work on one project. You can't put 300 people at the same time to work on milking a cow, just as you can't put 5 developers on changing a single line of CSS. So really consider my first option. Do you really need this job? Because there are quite a lot of developer opportunities out there, and you're just, at this point, you're just getting paid less. That's in effect what's happening. Have a great day.